Good morning, and thank you very much for attending our session. My name is Patricia Kovacevic. I have about 15 years of experience in the nicotine industry, including tobacco and vaping. And since a few months ago, I've set up my own consulting business. My presentation is going to be available, so I'm going to sort of skip through the first few slides and get to the most important part, which is just some recent developments in a litigation involving the Food and Drug Administration that will change substantially the outlook, in my opinion, for the vaping market in the US. So we'll start with a brief recap of the Tobacco Control Act and how electronic nicotine delivery systems have come under its scope. Looking at a couple of developments during the past year, and then of course moving on to the litigation update, and of course very quick conclusion, what can the ENDS industry expect? I'm not going to read this slide, but the takeaway is the Tobacco Control Act from 2009 gave FDA authority over all tobacco-derived products that are not drugs, and FDA exercised that authority by bringing additional products, including ENDS products, under the Tobacco Control Act in 2016 through a regulation, or as we call it in the US, rule. However, the consequence of that regulation, because of the way the Tobacco Control Act is written, and again, I'm not going to enter details in the interest of time, you can read all of this, was that basically conventional cigarettes could continue to sell on the market relatively unimpeded, but vaping products were scrutinized in a different way, and all the vaping products on the market in 2016 could not undergo any changes without FDA's premarket authorization. Furthermore, in order to continue to sell all the vaping products that were on the market in 2016, FDA gave all ENDS products manufacturers initially until 2018 and then until 2022 to file a very comprehensive product dossier, including clinical studies, toxicology research, and so on and so forth, just to be able to keep the products on the market. Of course, all would have been really nice and good, except that FDA is not enforcing their own law, their own rule rather, that requires no changes to be made. So we've seen a flurry of products coming on the market. In fact, FDA has even contacted some manufacturers asking them, what's the deal? You weren't supposed to change your products since 2016, but you've introduced some new ones. That deeming rule, or that rule, it's colloquially called the Deeming Rule, was challenged by my former employer and actually led that litigation. The litigation is pending. It's the Nicopure Labs versus FDA litigation, and it's right now on appeal. We're waiting for a decision. But of course, other things have happened in the meantime. So whether we're going to be successful or not, that may or may not change some parts of the Deeming Rule. Well, let me provide a few notes about developments from 2019. So there were various deadlines under the Deeming Rule, nicotine warnings. Look what the products look like. So basically you have the old cigarettes, and this is the health warning. That's what the consumers see. But for vaping product, this is a health warning. So it conveys a very misleading message, right? There were other deadlines this year under the Deeming Rule: ingredients, listings, harmful and potential harmful constituents. And finally, FDA issued a bunch of guidance documents which were supposed to clarify what manufacturers had to do to submit that product dossier, which we call a premarket tobacco application, or PMTA, was supposed to be 2022, but as you will see, it's going to be sooner. So, you know, all kind of new guidance documents since last year's conference that I'm not going to go through. But the most important thing is the sentiment at FDA and in the US market is very much cautious against vaping products. So under pressure by public health, a group of, basically a group of, let me flip that. A group of NGOs led by the American Academy of Pediatrics filed a litigation. They initially wanted to join FDA in the Nicopure lawsuit as co-defendants. And then they changed their mind and said, you know what, we don't want to be on the side of FDA, we want to sue FDA. So they did last year in March. And that litigation moved extremely fast, so that literally about a month ago or a month and a half ago, basically a judge said, siding with the American Academy of Pediatrics, the judge said, well, 2022 is a really long deadline for ENDS manufacturers to submit a PMTA, a premarket tobacco application. We think that's too much time. We think vaping products present an unreasonable risk. Look at all these youth vaping and all of that, which is true or not true, depending on who you believe. But the judge sided with them. And the judge said, you know what, you FDA, tell us, how do you propose to, to address this? Because we cannot leave these products on the market until 2022. The deadline has got to be much closer. Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Pediatrics asked for 4 months. So if it were after them, basically manufacturers would have another 6 months from now to file PMTAs. And those are very complex product applications, almost like a drug application. Of course, FDA wrote a brief in response. A few days ago, they filed it. And this is really the development I want to emphasize during this speech. Basically, FDA said, yeah, we agreed, 2022 may be too far, but we think 10 months is the right time. Conclusion of it, we really have another year. If you're an ENDS manufacturer in the US, all of a sudden you have 1 more year instead of having 3 years, or so you thought you had, until 2022, to file, again, a very, very complex product dossier, including stability studies, clinical studies, stuff that takes years to develop, population surveys, all you want. The interesting part is the following, and that's what I'd like to focus on as well. In their response brief filed just a few days ago, basically FDA attached Mitch Zeller's, the Center for Tobacco Products Director, statement. And in that statement, there are some very important nuggets of acknowledgement, maybe the first time that FDA acknowledges that, in fact, were all vaping products to be taken off the market, smokers who had switched to vaping might have to go back to smoking. And I will strongly, strongly advise you to look that brief up, and I'll be very happy to make it available, and look up Mitch Zeller's declaration attached in support to that brief, because he makes important acknowledgments about the value of vaping in harm reduction, which is really the first time we see it, and it's a sworn testimony. It's the first time we see it articulated in that manner. Because Zeller has said many times before, they said, yes, we acknowledge the benefit of vaping for individuals and so on. But this is the first time that FDA addresses in writing, in a sworn declaration before a court, and in public, of course, it's all public, it's addressing the basically the value of smoking at population level, of vaping at population level to switch from smoking. This is litigation. Of course, you can look it up yourselves. The brief that I'm talking about is called Defendant's Remedy Brief, was just filed a few days ago by the FDA. And this is really the quote that I'm talking about. It says, basically, a shorter deadline for PMTAs would cause significant public health concerns as well as implementation challenges. It could suddenly clear the market of thousands of e-cigarette products, raising the risk that some former smokers addicted to nicotine might migrate back to conventional cigarettes. So, that's really very, very valuable. Look it up. Also, the other nugget of information that may be of interest to all of you, at present, there are no PMTAs pending before the FDA for vaping products. None, zero. And they expect everybody on the market to file them and to finish them in 10 months. This is surreal almost. What can the industry expect? I'm concluding my speech with saying, we know standards for nicotine in cigarettes are coming. We saw it in the FDA's regulatory agenda. ENDS flavors seem to be a problem with the FDA, as do nicotine salts. I personally, and that's my personal opinion, completely uncorroborated, believe that nicotine salts are going to have a difficult time getting approved as a PMTA because simply there is a higher level of scrutiny. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. And also, don't count on Interim Commissioner Sharpless to be a friend of the industry, because it doesn't seem that he is. Finally, last but not least, the Nicopure Labs case, we may win, we may lose, but I think there is a strong chance to go before the Supreme Court. There is an important First Amendment argument. Thank you very much. That's my presentation, and you didn't have to ring the buzzer.
I did not.